Gen AI has actually caught on in the cybersecurity world.
These cybersecurity strategies are not a destination, but it's going to be a journey.
Risk equals threats times vulnerabilities times business impact.
End users are the weakest link in this entire IT chain.
Hello everyone, welcome to Manage Engine's Masterclass on essential elements for devising a cybersecurity strategy in 2025. My name is Ram and I'm a cybersecurity specialist at Manage Engine. I've been with Manage Engine for the last 10 years now, and as part of my role, I look at cybersecurity from two different angles, from the attacker's point of view and the defender's point of view. So I research about the different ways in which attackers can wage wars against organizations and steal their sensitive information. And I also keep myself updated about the different ways in which organizations can protect themselves against these attacks. In 2025, with so many cyber threats coming our way, being vigilant is the first line of defense. In today's masterclass, we'll explore the different ways in which organizations can protect themselves and be better prepared against these cyber attacks. Joining me today in this masterclass is Praveen.
Thank you, Ram, for having me here. Hello, everyone. My name is Praveen. I've been with Manage Engine for more than 15 years, and I'm the regional technical head for Manage Engine. And I've spent almost 18 plus years in the market for consulting with customers for both IT management and security solutions. And also I have been privileged that I've been part of their digital transformation journey.
Great. So Praveen, any conversation about the future of cybersecurity necessarily means that we also have to go into the past. Right. And just like cybersecurity technologies have evolved, the cyber attackers have also evolved over time.
True.
So do you know of any popular cyber attacks that you can highlight here?
Right. So let's say back in 2010, right, there was something called Operation Aurora, where a Chinese advanced persistent threat group organized an attack on many organizations and government. And most of the companies were being affected due to that, but Google was the first company to publicly accept that they've been affected. So that brought a lot of awareness between other organizations. And so they actually used a sophisticated method where they send out phishing emails and a lot of campaigns to gain access for the source codes and other intellectual properties, right? So this actually brought a lot of awareness between US and China in their cyber defense war as well. And again, back in 2017 May, if I can remember, we had this ransomware WannaCry, right? Where there were companies where they were targeting some files within the Windows operating system, and there was something called Eternal Blue, right, where it was affecting almost I would believe 200,000 computers across 180 countries. So there were a lot of companies were affected, but the most one was impacted is the UK's National Health Organization, where most of their patient data were compromised. So again, if I remember correctly, that I do see that you have published a lot of articles around 2020 with regards to a lot of cyber attack. I would love to hear from you on that as well.
Definitely, Praveen. And let me take you back to times before the pandemic. I'm talking about December 2019 and January 2020. We had a notorious ransomware. It was called the Snake ransomware. And this ransomware was kind of different. It was dangerous for a few reasons. Number one, what it would do is it would actually try and find the backups that organizations had and delete them before infecting the system, so that it would increase the chances that the organization will pay. Because the first thing after ransomware attack, they're going to go look for the backups, right? So that was not possible in the Snake ransomware's case. The second thing that it did was the file extension was completely randomized. So in a normal ransomware attack, we had the WannaCry ransomware attack. The file extension was known, and we could have signature detection systems to detect that just by looking at the file extension. But in the Snake ransomware, that was random. The other thing was there was a little bit of intelligence built into Snake ransomware as well. It would know if the environment it is in is a virtual environment or a sandbox, and if it was true, it would quietly exit. So yes, I would like to highlight the Snake ransomware. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack in May 2021, which hit the oil and gas industry of the United States. And the attackers ended up taking more than 100 GB of data. And once they did that, they let loose this ransomware attack on the organization. And the organization was not operating for as many as 5 days, it led to widespread panic, actually.
I could understand the impact of it.
Right. So that was a colonial pipeline attack. And the way it actually started was because in the dark web, a user's credential was actually leaked. The attackers, who were actually a group called Dark Side, they got a hold of those credentials and they went into the network through a VPN, which was not configured with multi-factor authentication or MFA. So that's how they got in. And now in 2024, 2025 and beyond, we are seeing more and more, or we will see more and more cases of ransomware as a service, where attackers can go into the dark web and hire the services of a ransomware developer. So it doesn't even have to be somebody who's sophisticated anymore. They can just go and get the code or hire the code and then let loose the ransomware attack.
So if I can understand it correctly, it's like ransomware as a service.
Ransomware as a service.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
So all these attacks that we spoke about just now, Praveen, they prove one thing: organizations have to be very vigilant. So in your opinion, what do you think organizations can do to be vigilant?
That's a fantastic question. So let's say, in my consultation experience, right, I always have a picture of an organization. So let's say if I were to break an organization, I'll break into 3 parts. One is your employees, probably a remote employee or a hybrid employee. And then you have your data center. Let's say if you're on a cloud or an on-premise, and then you have your customers, right? So you're accountable for your customers' data and privacy, right? So if I were to let's say if I drill into the data center part, you have bigger things like you have networks, both on-premise and cloud network, you have servers, and then in cloud you have much more bigger things like Kubernetes, Docker, containers. Mm-hmm. And then you have your corporate IT where all your access points that connects to your switch and everything, right? So if I were to put a cyber strategy for my network infrastructure, right? The first thing starts with a clear inventory on what is available in your network, and that should also help you to detect your rogue devices, right? Second, there has to be a clear segmentation of your network, segmentation of your network. So that gives a clear visibility on what goes in, what comes out. Basically, you need to have a traffic-based understanding what comes in. Probably you can implement an IDS and IPS to understand what kind of threats that have been identified and mitigated. And then on the firewall level, you also need to have a clear idea on what are the rules that are unused, because those unused rules are your hacker's paradise, right? Similar way, from your data center level, right? You have access switches, core switches and all. So there has to be a clear segmentation, what kind of data that goes in, and any data that is in transit, right? It has to be encrypted both in the data in rest as well as data in motion. So these are some of the best practices that we need to do in terms of securing your network infrastructure from cybersecurity attacks. So let's say, if I were to break an organization, right, I will have 3 different components. One is end users, right? You have end users who are remote and who are hybrid. And then you have data centers. Probably it could be a cloud-based data center, or it could be an on-premise data center. And then you have your customers, right? Now here in this entire value chain, right? If I were to focus only on data center right now, let's say within data centers, you have your network, servers, application, database, middleware, a lot of things are there, right? Now, if I talk about more specific to network, right? The first thing starts from getting an inventory. Like, you do a subnet-based discovery, which pulls out every information. And then you need to have a strong, network traffic analyzer, which talks about like what goes in, what comes out, right? Which gives you, or let's say, you implement a deep packet inspection, to tell you, what kind of, destination that you're sending traffic to. Who are the sources that are generating traffic? What kind of application is generating more traffic, right? So ideally, when there is any increased events that are coming in, you get to know some kind of anomalies. And on top of it, there are device-specific, configurations that has to be done. So let's say you need to make sure that, your network configurations are intact. You need to find out what kind of changes that are going. Because ideally, when if there is any change that's going on network, it could be, a change that is required, or it could be a change that is, a consequences of some cybersecurity threat, right? So we need to have a clear understanding on who did the change, from where did they do the change, and is this change is an authorized or unauthorized change, right? And then on the firewall level, right, the more important thing is we need to have a clear segmentation and also visibility on what are your unused routes, right? Because these unused rules are your hacker's paradise, right? And later on, any backups that, for example, let's say if an engineer is trying to do some kind of changes using a telnet or whatever way, right? Obviously, there are syslogs which detects those information. The moment if there is any unauthorized operation has been executed, it has to be backed up quickly. Because ideally, if you see, there are a lot of bigger enterprises faced a minor outage because of human error. It might not be a cybersecurity threat, but again, it also leads to a business disruption, right? So for network infrastructure, the inventory, checking the rogue devices, having a clear configurations backup, and also setting up baseline configurations, understanding what comes in, what goes out, plus having a clear segmentation of your network infrastructure plays a vital role in your cybersecurity strategy.
So Praveen, you just spoke about network security, but I have a question here. What about the server side?
So for server side, the first thing is we have to do a server hardening, and then there has to be a proper backup. And then you also need to protect your applications from this DDoS attacks. And also, there are data that is being moving in and out. So all these data which goes in and out has to be encrypted. So these are 4 major points that we need to focus on server side.
Right, but can you go a little deeper? Can you give me some examples about this?
Yeah, so let's say, for example, for server hardening, right? Now, if you see servers, there are multiple things that interacts, right? So let's say first server hardening is from the OS level, where, I need to disable a lot of services like, FTP, RDP, all these kind of, all these kind of services has to be disabled. And second is, any data that goes in, goes out has to be encrypted. The proper data backup has to be in place. And also, there is a web layer, you have applications that are running on the server. So I need to check on what kind of SQL injections that are going on. And obviously, I will run too many APIs to retrieve and put the data back, right? So what is the mechanism or what is the security on top of these APIs calls that have been made to the servers? And third is, obviously there are users who are associated or who can connect to the servers, right? So probably I may also need to bring some kind of a zero trust policy where, I will give only the least privileges all the time. And whenever they want to elevate themselves, then I can give them a privileged elevated access on time. And then it has to be revoked on time-to-time basis. So there has to be a robust PAM solution in place where it can channelize the connection to a server, and whatever the user does should be audited. And also, once they are out, it has to be, the passwords has to be rotated and encrypted with highest encryption with AES 256.
So we've just spoken about server side of things, right? When it comes to security. What about the end user side?
Right. So end users are the weakest link in this IT chain. Let me explain you how, right? Now let's say, I send out a phishing email at the month end with an attachment, right? Saying that, paycheck released, or do not open this attachment. And the next moment we know what will happen, right? So that's again, so basically, of course, the user awareness training is important. But again, if you see the setup of the end users, right, the strategy has to start from the onboarding of the users itself, because you have too many types of users, like you have remote users, you have hybrid users, right? So from the onboarding side itself, you need to say what kind of applications that he needs to access, right? Within the application, what is his role-based access, whether he is an administrator or an operator or just a guest or a read-only user, right? So then he has his device, let's say a laptop, or a desktop or a mobile phones, basically we call them endpoints, right? So that sanity check of those endpoints must be a crucial point, because today the biggest problem in any organization is shadow IT, right? Without the knowledge of system administrators, we tend to install multiple applications. What if that application has a malicious code inside, right? So whatever application that we run, be it a Microsoft application or a third-party application, irrespective of this platform, be it a Windows or let's say a Linux or a Mac, the application has to be patched to the latest patch, right? And then we also need to set some kind of a strategy, like what are the applications can run on an audit mode, and what are the applications that can run on a strict mode, right? Second, you also need to bring more of like antivirus, anti-ransomware component on top of it, right? And also, let's say if I were to be let's say a network administrator or a server administrator who's part of the employee as well, you need to adopt the zero trust policy, right? So for example, when I'm trying to access a critical server which has crucial information, how am I able to access the server? All these privileged accounts should not be visible to these people, right? So you need to have a PAM solution in place where the authentication of those servers or any application should be handled by the PAM, right? And let's say if I'm a user who wants to access server, once after all these control workflow, I should be able to land into the server. And whatever that I do should be recorded, and then it's used for the audit purpose. And the moment when I'm out, or when the PAM solution kicks me out, right, those credentials has to be rotated, right? So ideally, there are too many things that we need to focus on the end user side, because if it is a data center, we have a little bit of control, but when it comes to end user, we don't have much of a control over them, because ideally they have different set of behavior, different set of usage patterns, right? So bringing an awareness among them is again one of the top things to set a cybersecurity strategy for the end users.
Absolutely right, Praveen. In fact, you just covered network, server, the end user. What it tells me is that we have to cover security from every angle.
That's right.
It's the entire IT value chain.
True.
And you touched upon it a bit, when you were speaking as well. And what it tells me is that every organization needs a comprehensive risk assessment.
Okay.
That is where things actually get started. Because it's a risk assessment that's going to let you know what your security gaps are.
Can you, give me some brief about this risk assessment?
Yeah. The first thing that any organization needs to do to get started with a risk assessment is that they have to get a hold of their complete inventory. They have to know what they have. So doing that discovery and getting to know what the data assets are, and then being able to classify the sensitive data assets, right? That is the first part of it. Now, one way to do that is to, maybe centralize the entire risk assessment, function, and the team can go ahead and ask the different departments, in case it's a larger company, for the sensitive data that they hold. In a smaller company, it's much simpler. So you start with inventory. You also need to know what the threats are that your company is exposed to. Threats are anything that can cause a potential harm to the organization's data. So here I'm thinking about things like a power failure, which is a threat. And you can also bring in things like malicious insiders or even accidental insiders. What I mean by accidental insiders is that they have no malicious intent, but yet they are doing something wrong, and that leads to some sort of a problem. That is also a threat. And of course, you have your cyber attackers, from the external world, who are also a threat. You also need to know what your vulnerabilities are. Now, vulnerabilities are loopholes in the network. So, you touched upon it previously. If a system is not patched, that's a loophole waiting to be exploited. Apart from that, you can also have outdated systems or outdated applications. Now, these are all vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Now, going from there, what an organization needs to do to estimate its risk is through a simple formula. It's risk equals threats times vulnerabilities times business impact. So, and we just spoke about threats and vulnerabilities. Business impact is a measure that organizations, through their own wisdom, need to attach to a particular data asset. So in case a data asset were to be compromised, what is the business impact going to be? So that is an estimate that they have to do, and using this formula, they can actually estimate their risk. Now, this entire thing is a business construct. So risk can be measured in terms of high, medium, and low. And this is going to be a function of a high, medium, and low for your threats, a high, medium, low for your vulnerabilities, and high, medium, low for your business impact.
That's like a matrix.
Kind of like a matrix. And that is how you estimate your risk. And what you can then do, to go beyond this, is actually come up with a heat map or a risk map. And you can actually, the way that you put it, on a matrix, you can actually visualize where your risk levels are. And then once you prioritize what your risks are, you actually start adopting certain technologies, cybersecurity technologies, and then you address those gaps that you have identified for those risks. Then you would get to a place where there is residual risk. So maybe at the beginning of the quarter, you're at one place when it came to your risk. But then after adopting certain technologies to address the risks that you have prioritized, you're at another place. So you've actually, decreased your risk, hopefully. So that is what an organization needs to do.
Right. So if I understand it correctly, your business impacts plays a major role, and then comes your risk impact, and then it comes with what kind of vulnerability that you're facing, right?
Yeah. So your risk is a function of threats, vulnerabilities, and your business impact.
Got it.
So you'd be able to actually estimate these three measures, that is threats, vulnerabilities, and business impact. And then through that, you'll be able to estimate your risk.
Got it.
And then the assets that are marked as the most risky, they would be the ones that you prioritize.
Right. So same in the same lines, I've been talking to multiple SOC people, right? So first is, they kind of classify their critical information and non-critical information. And for critical information, any kind of attacks that comes in, the first thing is to, identify whether it's a cyber attack or not, it's a threat or not, right? So in same line, ideally classification of data is far more crucial to understand the business impact. Is my understanding correct?
Definitely. You've got to be able to classify your data, and you need to have a label that says that this data is very sensitive. Maybe this other data is not so sensitive, because resources are scarce and you can't definitely put all of your efforts into protecting everything that you have. So you have to take some informed decisions over there. So prioritizing of the risk is very critical.
Understood.
So Praveen, we've just spoken about risk assessment and prioritizing risks. Now, one thing that comes out of all of this is visibility. Organizations should have visibility into every part of their network.
Right.
Could you elaborate on this?
Okay, that's a fantastic question. Now, let me bring a concept called observability. I guess most of the people know here, right? Now, let me give you an example first, right? We all used an app called Skyscanner or a Google Flights, right? Now, you put your source, destination, dates, how many people are traveling, whether you need a flight, hotel, accommodation, rental car. Then you click on search, it gives you ample number of results. And these are called microservices, right? So certain things you will have data from your partner network, and then it goes for a payment where you have a payment gateway, right? Now, here the full stack visibility is you need to get information from all the unknowns, right? Whether, for example, if a user is having a problem, whether it's a user related problem, or it's a landing zone problem, or it's a core infrastructure problem, or if it's a banking payment problem, right? So ideally, the observability has three key pillars. One is logs, traces, and metrics. Now for security, I will also recommend the security has to be the fourth pillar of observability, so that you get the configuration logs on one side, similar way you get the security logs on the same side, so that when there is any kind of outage today, when you look into the outage, right, we were not sure whether the outage is because of any misconfigurations or human error, or it's something result of a cybersecurity threat, right? So along with this observability, which gives you the full stack visibility, security has also to be a part of the fourth pillar, right? Now, ideally, there are security logs, and I'm really sure that you have written a lot of blogs about SIEM. Now, my question to you is, how does this log, feeds data to an SIEM, and how does a security analyst is benefited using these SIEM tools?
In my opinion, an SIEM solution would be the nerve center of any security operations center. And it is an integral part of any security analyst arsenal, because it can connect to every part of the network, whether it's on premises or in the cloud. So it can connect to your employee workstations, syslog devices like routers, switches, and firewalls. It can connect to databases. It can also connect to, if in case it has those capabilities, cloud security capabilities, it can also connect to the cloud apps that the employees use. Get all of that information in, analyze them, and help a security analyst investigate, and then ultimately respond to a particular threat. There are also automated workflows that are available in next-gen SIEMs that will help a security analyst just program what is to be done as a first line of defense. So they're not waiting for an alert to come to them and then respond.
I guess it's being vigilant again.
It's being very vigilant again. Yeah. Absolutely right. So across the entire spectrum, right from the time the alert comes in, then the security analyst investigating that alert, step by step, finding out the root cause, and then responding to the particular threat. That is what a SIM solution or any security analytics platform can help a security analyst to do, actually. Now, one other thing when it comes to SIM that I would like to highlight is threat intelligence. It's extremely critical to have threat intelligence capabilities in your security analytics. There are companies out there which are in the business of threat analytics, and they are able to give SIM solutions a continuous feed of threats that they actually see. And your security analytics platform or your SIM should be able to make use of these threat feeds and the context that they get from that, plus what they actually observe within their network. The two should be put together. Right. Now, with these threat feeds, they'll be able to see any sort of malicious IP or a domain that is trying to establish communication within the network, and it can be blocked right then and there, or an alert can be raised. The other thing that's very, very popular now is dark web monitoring. Mm-hmm. And we know that a lot of things happen in the dark web. There are lots of leaked credentials that are available in the dark web too. In fact, we mentioned the ransomware in 2021, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware, which actually happened. It was the same thing. It was a leaked credential in the dark web. So anytime a leaked credential is found there, the security analyst should be alerted about that. So that is dark web monitoring. Okay. These are essential elements that any SIM solution should have.
Right.
Anything you have to add here, Praveen?
Yeah, one more point is, of course, this user and entity behavior analysis, right? Now, I'll explain you how it works, then what is the benefit of it, right? Obviously, it has 4 steps. One is like data collection, where it collects data from full stack IT, from your users, from your data center components, everything, right? And the second is it sets a baseline. Based on their behavior, it sets a baseline. And then, you also have the threat intelligence, right? Where it feeds the data. And whatever activity that a user or an entity does, right? It compares that with the baseline, and then it raises an anomaly if there is any unusual behavior that's been identified. And the last part is, of course, alerting the SOC team about these behavior, right? Now, ideally, these are the way how Yuba works, and ideally it also generates some patterns, right? So, for example, if you talk to a site reliable engineers in DevOps side, they have 4 golden signals in application like latency, saturation, error, and there's another 4th one. So, likewise, in Yuba, we have this user behavior analytics. So, for example, let's say I'm a person where I log in from 9 to 6. And that's a pattern that I operate in some other fashion. Now, what if I log in at midnight, right, try to log into a database, dropping a lot of tables, taking unusual backups. So these are some patterns that are deviating from my usual pattern, right? So ideally, I raise, time-bound anomalies, pattern-bound anomalies, and also count-bound anomalies. So there are a lot of anomalies that can be directed over it. So with this, these are like, internal intelligence, where I kind of go back in time, look for your behavior pattern, match that with the current pattern, and gives you what are the likely or confirmed anomalies. So UEBA is one of the important thing that an SIM should always have.
Right. And just to add here, Praveen, I would also say that UEBA systems, they should have this feature called seasonality. They should be able to look at seasonal patterns, is what I mean here. So let's say that towards the end of the month, an organization shows heightened activity, right? Maybe it's a sales team trying to reach their targets. So it is very natural for the organization to be very active at the end of the month, right? True. And that should not be seen as an anomaly. Yeah. So your UBA system, your UEBA system should be actually able to recognize those patterns. So it should be able to have a sense of the time of the day of the week of the month, and even the month of the year. So it should have that seasonal intelligence built in as well. So that is a very critical capability to have. The other thing that I would like to highlight when it comes to UEBA is peer group analysis. Right. So this is where the system just observes what is going on in the network, and people who show similar behavior are actually put into a particular peer group, the same peer group actually. So in case there is an activity that is being performed by a user on a given day that deviates from their own, let's say, normal baseline, but it is still part of the baseline of the average user in the peer group that they belong to, that means it is not so much an anomaly. It is actually fine. So the risk attributed to this sort of an activity should be less, and it should not be seen as so much of a deviation. So this is another thing that UEBA should be able to have.
Right. So even if I can, put a a natural use case. Let's say I'm doing a maintenance task on first and third Saturdays.
Right.
Let's say if there's a guy on second Saturday, the system should be able to tell me, you're not supposed to be here. Right. You're supposed to be on first and third. What are you doing on second Saturday? Is that correct?
Absolutely. Perfect. And because there is activity on the first and third and it has observed it in the past, that would not be seen as an anomaly.
Right. So Ram, you spoke about seasonality behavior. You added something about peer group analysis. Now, my question to you is, how does Gen AI could be a value add to these kind of setup?
Great question, Praveen. So what we have spoken about thus far is ML algorithms, right? So we are making use of ML algorithms that is to detect all of these anomalies. Now, Gen AI has actually caught on in the cybersecurity world, and it can actually be used to guide a security analyst towards the investigation. We can actually give them step-by-step instructions about what to do once a threat is detected. So that is one way Gen AI can be used. The other way that Gen AI can be used is to actually generate reports. Now, at the end of every incident, the security analyst needs to write a report and then submit it to management, and then they will look at the report and take some decisions based on it. Now, Gen AI can actually be used over here, where it can generate that first draft of the report, and the security analyst can just review it and then submit it to management.
Okay, makes sense.
These are some of the ways in which Gen AI can be used in cybersecurity, more so in the future. The other thing is we can also bring in some LLMs over here, where right now, when a security analyst needs to know what is going on, they query the system. They write a query with Boolean operators and such, but they can actually, in the future, just use natural language to query the system. It would be able to understand that and give them the results. It would also be able to predict what the system, the security analyst wants to know by just looking at what they have typed thus far, and then complete that query for them.
Okay.
So these are ways in which Gen AI can be used in the future.
Nice.
So Praveen, we have spoken about a few technologies thus far to protect the infrastructure. But what about cloud? There are so many organizations moving to the cloud now. What about cloud security?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Now, as you know that, cloud started as a very niche technology, and now it's become an indispensable, requirement for business of all size. And obviously, if you see, AWS holds 32% of market share, while Azure holds 21% of it, right? Now, in 2025, there's going to be almost 8 zillion data, which I definitely couldn't imagine that, right? So most of the data will move to cloud. So this shows that there is a huge, path that, companies are moving towards a cloud. So does the threat, right? Now, if I talk about, the cloud migrations and the threat around it, right? So obviously I can split into 3 parts. One is your core infrastructure, which is on the cloud, and your users, who's hybrid, and then there is a data in motion, right? Now, if I talk about, users, right? The strategy is we need to have a conditional policy, which means where are the users accessing from? What are they trying to access? From which machine they are trying to access? So all these has to be identified by a cloud provider, whether to provide an access or not, right? And obviously, there are too many calls that has been done between these, on-premise and the cloud. Now there is a data that is in motion. So any data that goes in, out has to be, encrypted as well. And then within the core infrastructure, right? We need to have a clear rules that are defined in our, VPCs, like what kind of users are allowed to access our core applications, and what are the services that are to be accessed. So ideally, a clear segmentation of those things. And also, and I've been talking to multiple system integrators as well, who are more specialized in migration, right? Initially, people thought that, moving to cloud seems to be cost effective. But now there's a change where if you are hosting your, let's say, a monolithic app on a containers or a Dockers or a Kubernetes, then cloud seems to be a preferred option, because managing those infrastructure becomes so seamless. in the cloud where they have OpenShift, other technologies. Whereas your crucial services, which doesn't depend upon these modern software containerization that can run on cloud, right? So from when I talk about security strategy on cloud, of course, it all starts from inventory. Again, we will go through the same thing, like, how a network infrastructure has to be secured, how a server has to be secured, how does a user who's accessing the cloud has to be secured. So ideally, having all these in place, you will be able to set up a good strategy across the cloud infrastructure. And more importantly, there are too many, cloud applications which talks to each other, right? Now, how are you putting, a cyber defense security where, any kind of APIs that are being called, is that legitimate? Are there any vulnerabilities? Are there any SQL injections? So these things has to be taken care when we talk about, cloud migrations and cloud cybersecurity strategies. So Ram, we spoke about, cloud migration, cloud security, but there are two aspects that strikes my mind. One is cloud security posture management, and also you have something called CASB. Can you give me some insights on that?
Yeah, cloud security posture management, it's also called CSPM in the world of cybersecurity. It's basically about two things, vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. It's very, very critical. And the way it works is the organization is looking for a measure to the exposure of risk that they have when it comes to the cloud. So there's got to be a system in place for them to be able to measure that risk. And every quarter, they have to be actually actively watching if they're able to bring down that risk. So that is cloud security posture management. Now, when it comes to CASB or Cloud Access Security Brokers, there are three main deployment modes when it comes to CASB. One is the forward proxy, then you have the reverse proxy based CASB, and then you have the API scanning mode. The forward proxy CASB is extremely effective when it comes to data in motion, and also when it comes to monitoring the access of cloud-based applications from within the organization through a managed device. But then, of course, in this day and age, a lot of the users are actually remote. They work from anywhere, right? So given that climate, a reverse proxy comes into the picture. So irrespective of where the user is placed or what machine they are using, it can be even in their own personal laptop, a reverse proxy can be used to detect what is going on in terms of cloud applications being accessed. So a CASB is able to give information such as who accessed which application at what time, the IP address, and so on. A cloud access security broker can also enable you to have conditional based activity. So if you want to download something or upload something into the cloud, you can either block it completely or you can put rules over there. So that is possible. Or it can also block the complete access. So in case the access is happening at a time that is not really expected, you can actually put in that as a rule and you can block the access too. So this is all possible through a CASB. I spoke about the forward and the reverse proxy. When it comes to API scanning, this is more for data at rest. So we have API connectors that are actually connecting into the cloud infrastructure and giving information about what is happening with the data at rest. So yes, when it comes to cloud security, CASBs are integral. So great conversation, Praveen. We started about the past, what happened in the past. We spoke about the present. The obvious thing is the future. So what do we have in store in 2025 and beyond?
So we have two things which is more concerning. One is deepfakes, right? So before I say what is deepfake, I'm a big fan of Mission Impossible series, right? So ideally, deepfakes are nothing but, you take a content from one person and replace the identity with another person. So basically, it works with two neural network. One is a generator where it generates videos and images. And then there is a differentiator where it differentiates which is a legitimate content and which is a fake content. Though it's an interesting, technology, but, there are serious questions that have been rising from that. Because ideally, I can steal your identity. And let's say, I'm giving some kind of a negative thought, where I deepfake that with some kind of celebrity. Right? That becomes, it's more of like, stealing their identity, and it creates a lot of problem for them, right? That's one thing. Now there are, tools, AI and ML tools, which are available in the market to differentiate that, right? And the second one is, data poisoning, right? Which is again an interesting topic, right? Now the question for data poisoning is, what if I modify your data that trains your AI model, right? So for example, let's say you're driving an autonomous car, right? Now the vehicle has been trained in a way that it should recognize certain objects like traffic lights, objects, people, vehicles, and zebra crossing lines, right? Now what if I introduce another object which might look like a signal, but there is no signal, right? Or what if I do a data poisoning on let's say a zebra crossing image, replace that with a small object on the road that can be ignored. So you understand what is the magnitude, right? So again, data poisoning is also one of the cybersecurity threat that's going to emerge in 2025, and obviously there are a lot of companies who are using their LLM and everything. They're focusing on strategizing their security towards data poisoning, right? Now I would also put up across a question to you, like as you are a cybersecurity expert, right? What are things that you can think to prevent or to safeguard these data poisoning?
Actually, that's a very good question, a question that we are all wrestling with right now as AI-based attacks come to the fore. At the end of the day, all the data is stored in some server. So even the training data is stored over there. And we have to make sure that we use tools such as file integrity monitoring. And we are always continuously watching what's happening. As soon as the integrity of the data is changed or it's tampered with, we should be able to get an alert on that. Okay. But going beyond that, we should also be able to do things like taking that machine off the network or putting that user, or making that user disabled or logging off that particular user automatically. These are things that we can do to actually protect ourselves against data poisoning.
Right. So that I kind of recall a dialogue from a movie that these threat actors, right? They just need to succeed one time, right? But as an organization who are defending from those things, it's like a battle that we need to triumph every time. So for us, I would say that these cybersecurity strategies are not a destination, but it's going to be a journey that will have new challenges, new technologies, new adoption, and of course, new learnings.
Definitely. I totally agree with that. All they are looking for is that one loophole. Exactly. Whereas we as companies, we need to plug all loopholes, exactly. So that is what it is. And we'll be having another conversation, 10 years down the line, and we'll be talking about much more different things, but the topic would be, what do we do now? Right. So yes, that is how it's going to be. Right. And Praveen, we have spoken about so many technologies, and just now, we spoke about CASBs and we spoke about data poisoning and what we can do to defend against data poisoning. But in spite of adopting all these technologies, it is all about the user. And you made this point very beautifully earlier. The user is the weakest link. So it goes to show how important a cybersecurity culture is, how important the organizations need to place on awareness. So that is where things need to actually start. Organizations should adopt this cybersecurity culture and keep, making their employees aware about things. And, this is again never going to stop.
True.
It's going to keep going on and on. And I have also seen instances of companies that use micro trainings. So I don't think it's adequate to just, have a training once a year and be done with it. As and when a user performs any activity that is deemed inappropriate or risky, we can always imagine some sort of a pop-up that comes up and gives them that feedback right then and there. So that is the extent of, cybersecurity culture that I'm talking about over here. So yeah, that is how things need to evolve. And that, I think, brings us to the end of this conversation. Yeah. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Same here.
And thank you everyone for being a part of this masterclass.